Let's start. So, आजको session चाहिँ we'll look at code readability and performance. अनि what we'll do is हामी comparison गर्छौं यो दुईटाको अनि trade offs हेर्छौं. अनि लास्टमा there are some tips. So readability कसरी बढाउने अनि optimize कुन बेला गर्ने कसरी गर्ने भनेर. So let's dive in है त. So first मा चाहिँ there's a warning. Code samples मा semicolons छैन. And this will come in play पछि because readability is about preference पनि अलिअलि. So because मेरो project मा semicolons use हुँदैन, so now I prefer code without semicolons. Okay, so that's a warning. अब let's move on. So first मा चाहिँ I want to ask you guys, so what do you prefer? So code गर्दाखेरि do you like readability key? Do you focus more on performance key? Do you optimize often? Like anyone can share. Like, I invite you guys to share.
Performance र readability मा कुन prefer गर्छ भनेर सोधेको हो. Readability prefer गर्छ performance भन्दा. Personally म चाहिँ
के reason छ?
Reason चाहिँ I think कोडहरु चाहिँ त्यो अरुको कोडहरु पनि clearly चाहिँ बुझ्न essential छ. Performance in some extent चाहिन्छ नै हैन. तर few unnoticeable performance को लागि चाहिँ readability compromise गर्नु हुँदैन जस्तो लाग्छ. So that अरु टिममा अरु मेम्बर्सहरुले नि easily understand गरोस्. प्लस आफैले पनि त्यो कोड फ्युचरमा रिभिजिट गर्दा चाहिँ बुझ्न गाह्रो नहोस् भनेर.
Okay. Thank you, Suraj. So would anyone else like to share? Okay. Now would anyone else like to share? Okay. Okay, that's why let's move on. Right? So thank you, Suraj. So let's look at what readable code is, Suruma. So readable code bhaneko any code जसमा चाहिँ the logic is easy to follow and understand, right? So धेरै कुरा दिमागमा खेलाइराख्नु नपरोस् यो के थियो त्यो के थियो भनेर. अनि त्यसपछि readable code always starts with you. First you should be comfortable reading the code and understanding it. हैन आफूले नै सक्दैन भने त obviously no one else can. अनि त्यो पछि सुरजले यो point touch गरेको थियो, like if you come back पछि if you need to rework on a feature अनि फिर्ता आउँदाखेरि कोडै बुझेन भने like there's no use, right? So readable code को quality चाहिँ you can come back अनि एकछिन टाइम त लाग्छ context बुझ्न, but you pick up एकदम छिटो. अनि त्यसपछि code that your peers can understand. So आफूले मात्र नभएर if anyone else is reviewing your code अनि त्यसपछि like they're looking at your code अनि मजाले बुझ्छ भने that is readable code. So let's move on. So how do I tell if code is readable? So यो चाहिँ एउटा joke post थियो, right? But this is very accurate. So हामीले काम गर्दाखेरि so पुरानो फिचरहरुमा जाँदाखेरि we look at the code and we're like what is this stuff, हैन? But so we call it WTFs per minute, but the WTF does not stand for what you think it does. It stands for works that frustrate per minute. So you say like when we are reviewing code project ma kaam garदाखेरि पनि so यो भइरा हुन्छ के. So we look at the code कहिलेकाहीँ प्योर प्रोग्रामिङ गर्नुपर्छ अनि त्यसपछि we try to figure it out हैन. आफैले लेखेको कोड पनि we are like यसले के गरिरहेछ बुझ्दैन हैन. So this is a pretty jokey but accurate measure to tell if code is readable. So next we'll look at an example, right? So this is an example. So let's see, I'll touch upon it. So there's a function, so create user profile भन्ने अनि so we validate the profile for creation, right? अनि त्यसले some object return गर्छ अनि त्यसमा चाहिँ validation information हुन्छ. So if it's not valid, we throw an error, हैन, and then we get error data and throw it. And then if it's valid, we go down and we add a record to the profile store and we return the created profile, right? So your validate for create method is also simple. So we have a validation result. The first name empty छ भने we add an error to the result and a is less than 0 छ भने bro you can't be a negative age, right? So यो पनि एड गर्छ हामीले हैन सो दिस इज प्रिटी इजी टु फलो राइट सो यो कोड नहेरिकन पनि वी क्यान जस्ट लुक एट दिस फङ्सन एन्ड वी क्यान गेट एन आइडिया अफ वाट इट इज डुइङ अनि भ्यालिडेसन कसरी काम गर्छ हेर्नु पर्यो भने वी क्यान गो इन दिस अनि वी क्यान एक्चुली लुक एट दिस एन्ड फिगर इट आउट राइट सो this is somewhat of a readable code, but then again, it is also contextual. So कसैले चाहिँ गाह्रो होला यो पढ्न, especially if you like don't use languages that enforce data types, right? So अलिकति यो filter out गर्न गाह्रो हुन्छ, right? So it is contextual. So next so I have a question for you guys. So is this readable code? So chat just write yes or no what you think. Is this readable or not readable? It is a trick question. I just you don't have to be right or there's no right or wrong answer, Resma. So just write out in the chat yes or no. Okay, majority yes, majority no, 2 people yes, right? So this is actually readable code because this is Morse code, and Morse code is a standard code, right? So anyone who knows Morse code can read this and translate it. This translates to this is readable in Morse code, right? So let's look at another example. So is this readable code? Yes or no? Looking. Okay, so mostly no's, right? Anyone who says yes? Okay, कोही छैन yes भन्ने. All right. So this might be readable code. Why? Because this is actually a programming language, Rogin. This is the cow programming language. So esoteric languages भन्ने like सुनेछ भने कसैले they are like एकदमै they are created for fun, होइन, esoteric languages. So this is one of them. And this prints hello world in the cow programming language. So किन it might be भनेको भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ if someone knows the cow language, right, they can only determine यो readable हो कि होइन भने. अब मलाई आउँदैन cow language, so I don't know. So if someone knows the cow language, they can look at this code, and if they can follow it easily, it's readable. If they can't, it's not. Okay, so let's look at another one. Okay, now is this readable? Okay, no, yes, no. Okay, so most people say no. And so it is kind of readable because it is actually unreadable, but you could understand any code ever written if you had infinite time, right? So जति time, like it depends on time. So if you follow it माथिदेखि तलसम्म अनि अलि time लगाएर बुझ्न खोज्यो भने चाहिँ you can understand it. यो भनेको actually त्यो first को example थियो नि readable code को create profile, it does the same thing, you know, but it's unreadable because it does some stuff. So array use गर्छ object को सट्टा अनि त्यसपछि यो error message generate गर्न it's using string concatenation. with arrays अनि के गरे you don't understand it, right? So there's one last question. So यो चाहिँ don't try to read the code होइन. So झट्ट हेरेर like take 5 to 10 seconds अनि त्यतिमा if you can understand what it does, then like try to also guess यसले के गर्छ होला भनेर अनि would you call it readable? Okay, two correct answers. So this is actually bubble sort अनि एकदम standard implementation हो bubble sort को. So यो चाहिँ यहाँ मध्ये कसले like bachelors मा data structures and algorithms पढाएको छ, like this is the book definition of bubble sort होइन. So यो एक्जाम्पलले हामीलाई के देखाउँछ भन्दाखेरि like if you have the context of this problem then you can understand this यसले के गर्छ भनेर थाहा, because you know the algorithm bubble sortले यो गर्छ भनेर होइन. So कोड हेर्दाखेरि अनरिडेबल छ भन्दैमा कसैले नि बुझ्दैन भन्ने हुँदैन, because if you work दिनदिनै डेटा स्ट्रक्चर्समा, if you implement a library जसले चाहिँ सर्टिङ मात्र गर्छ होइन, even if you saw quick sort or merge sort हेर्ने बित्तिकै थाहा हुन्छ ए यो एल्गोरिदम हो भनेर है. So that is why we can conclude that readability depends on the context. So एउटा कोड हरेक कन्टेक्स्टमा अनरिडेबल हुँदैन, राइट? इट डिपेन्ड्स अन कुन एप्लिकेसनलाई कोड लेखिरहेको हो, कसले पढिरहेछ, लाइक इट डिपेन्ड्स अन अ लट अफ फ्याक्टर्स. So next, like let's look at another piece of code. So let's look at this, right? So I'll explain this. So यसमा चाहिँ so we have two parts, right? Back end र front end. So users छ डेटाबेसमा, so we just select everything from users अनि we loop through each user. अनि यो सिस्टममा के छ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ this is so एउटा युजरले अर्को युजरलाई रेफर गर्न मिल्छ, राइट? सो जसले रेफर गर्छ त्यसमा रेफरर आइडी भन्ने हुन्छ. सो इफ the user doesn't so if the user does not have a referrer ID, so this should be ulto. If the user has a referrer ID, ignore this not. अनि so we find the referrer अनि referrer name save गर्छौं युजरमा, छैन भने referrer name null set गर्छौं sorry, and then we send the response. So front end मा चाहिँ we filter out the users with referrer sorry okay, we filter out the users with referrer and without referrer. Give me 2 minutes. Okay, so we filter out users with referrer and without referrer, right? We use filter. So referrer छैन भने चाहिँ so referrer name null छैन भने चाहिँ users with referrer मा गयो, null छ भने चाहिँ users without referrer मा, and then we do something with the data है. So would anyone like to share what they would do to change this? What they would change? यसमा केही चेन्ज गर्न मन छ कसैलाई?
त्यो क्वेरीबाट सिधै रेफर आइडी गर्न मिल्छ होला, फेरि तानेर नगरिकन सिधै क्वेरीमै गर्न मिल्छ.
Yes, thank you Pratik. So अरु कसैलाई केही चेन्ज गर्न मिल्छ जस्तो लाग्छ यसमा? Okay, so let's move on. So yes, so if we were to optimize this, right? So we can just use an inner join अनि सिधै आउँछ हैन सबै, अनि we can select the referrer's name as referrer name. So this is more optimized, right? But it is also actually more readable. If you know SQL, then inner join is more readable than this stuff. I know you यत्रो लामो के गरे हैन, यहाँ इनर जोइन देख्ने बित्तिकै ओके जोइन गर्छ, यहाँ रेफरर नेम दिन्छ, सक्यो भनेर we can realize, right? तर फ्रन्ट एन्डमा हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ नाउ वाट वी आर डुइङ इज यहाँ दुईटा फिल्टर थियो होइन सो यसले चाहिँ युजर्समा दुईचोटि लुप गर्थ्यो होइन सो एक वान लुपमा विथ रेफरर निकाल्थ्यो अनदर लुपमा विदाउट रेफरर निकाल्थ्यो होइन सो फ्रन्ट एन्डमा यो अप्टिमाइज कोडमा के गर्यो भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ वान लुपमा सो दुईटा एरेमा पुस गर्यो है सो दिस इज समथिङ आई वुड नट डु बट इट इज एक्सेप्टेबल बिकज त्यस्तो अनरिडेबल छैन बट रिडेबिलिटी सेक्रिफाइस चाहिँ भयो होइन अलिअलि सो दिस इज लेस रिडेबल बट फास्टर इफ देयर आर अ लट अफ युजर्स अब यसमा के केस आयो भन्दाखेरि सो इफ देयर आर लाइक हन्ड्रेड्स अर लेट्स से थाउजन्ड्स अफ युजर्स यो फिल्टरले पनि पर्फर्मेन्स इम्प्याक्ट गर्थेन राइट बट इफ देयर आर मोर त्यो केसमा मात्र दिस वुड बी अप्टिमाइजेसन बट अर्को कुरा के हो भन्दा फ्रन्ट एन्डमा मोस्टली यु डोन्ट गेट त्यत्रो धेरै डेटा राइट पेजिनेट गरेर बिस्तारै बिस्तारै डेटा लिन्छ सो दिस वुड बी त्यत्तिकै गरेको अप्टिमाइजेसन बट इट्स स्टिल एक्सेप्टेबल किनभने रिडेबल चाहिँ छ होइन सो अलिअलि सेक्रिफाइस गरे नि सो लेट्स look at what optimized code is about. So it is modification of code to make it faster and more efficient. It reduces time and space complexity, right? And it's generally worth it, right? Generally worth it. So this is worth it. This is kind of worth it, but in most cases it is not, right? So let's try to optimize this further. So this is a micro optimization. So यहाँ के गरेछ भन्दाखेरि so this is very very unneeded होइन so अघिको क्वेरीमा यहाँ रेफरर नेम थियो राइट त्यसलाई आरएन मात्र बनायो अनि सेन्ड गर्यो ब्याक एन्डमा सो यो किन गर्यो भन्दाखेरि नेटवर्क ओभरहेड घटाउनु बिकज एक्सएमएल र जेसनमा पठाउँदा रेफरर नेम लामो भयो आरएन छोटो भयो सो इट युजेस लेस स्पेस होइन सो दिस डज नट म्याटर होइन सानो डेटा पठाउँदा बट इफ युआर सेन्डिङ अ मिलियन युजर्स देन या युल सेभ अ लट अफ बाइट्स बट देन अगेन मिलियन युजर्स एकैचोटि कसरी पनि पठाउँदैन राइट सो दिस इज अननिडेड अप्टिमाइजेसन फ्रन्ट एन्डमा पनि सो के प्रब्लम भयो भन्दाखेरि यो डु समथिङ विथ डेटा भन्ने मेथड छ यसले चाहिँ रेफरर नेम भन्ने प्रपर्टी मात्र बुझ्छ आरएन भन्ने बुझ्दैन राइट सो वाट यु हेभ टु डु इन द फ्रन्ट एन्ड इज you have to delete RN and then add a referrer name to each user, right? Your extra काम भयो front end like the back end को optimize गरेर भएर so this is micro optimization अनि यो काम छैन भन्दा नि हुन्छ so it is useful sometimes, right? So we'll come back to that पछि but यो केसमा it is of no use. So what is micro optimized code? So same as optimized code, right? First 2 points. So faster and more efficient, reduces time and space complexity, but it should only be done when there is evidence of a bottleneck. अब यो प्रब्लमै हैन प्रब्लम हो भनेर हामीसँग केही प्रुफै छैन भने we don't do it. अनि कम्पाइलर्सहरुले आफै नै they perform a lot of micro optimizations हैन so we should leave that up to the compilers, so we should not do that. So examples of more micro optimized code, so using ++i instead of i++, कसैलाई थाहा छ why ++i is considered faster than i++? Would anyone like to share? So, okay, if not, I'll tell you because I++ मा चाहिँ you make a copy. So I++ गर्दाखेरि so you use the value and then increment, right? So your I को copy बनाउनु पर्छ एउटा which will be used and then you increment the original I. So this is actually a bit slower than this, but it does not matter. So हरेक केसमा स्लो हुन्छ भन्ने छैन but it is this is never like slower than this but this might be slower than this. So अर्को example is doing this. So we have a method is array भनेर to test if something is an array, right? So यसको सट्टा you use length भन्ने property छ भने it's an array, नत्र it's not an array भनेर. So this will actually cause more bugs, right? And you should be एकदम certain that some object मा कुनै length भएको property भएको कुनै अरु object हुन सक्दैन भनेर यो युज गर्नलाई. So this is unnecessary headache, right? So यस्तो we should not do this. अनि अर्को चाहिँ this is exaggerated, right? So using Java or C# to develop software and then you are like एकदम slow भयो यो garbage collection ले म C++ युज गर्छु भनेर you use C++ garbage collector हुँदैन अलि fast चल्छ भनेर. And then you use smart pointers. So for people who don't know, smart pointers भनेको चाहिँ C++ मा so it automatically manages memory for you, right? So pointers but which are smart, they deallocate and allocate as needed. यसले पनि पुगेन अरे and then you write code to automatically delete memory in C++, you are creating a garbage collector again, right? So this is the stupid, and this happens यो स्केलमा नभए नि सानो स्केलमा this happens a lot of times. So we are reinventing the wheel for no reason. So next, let's look at readable versus performant code, right? So performant code does not always mean it is not readable. Or SQL example जस्तै. So nevertheless, optimization generally requires some sacrifice in readability. अलिअलि sacrifice चाहिँ चाहिन्छ. So performance of code is contextual, just like readability, right? So it depends on which language stack you're using and what features you're building and everything. And using language features that can be learned does not make code less readable. So let's say you're using some advanced feature of a language, and you are not making the code less readable, right? Because it can be learned, the language feature. So this is not, you can't count this as making code less readable. An important thing to note is that readable code is almost always easier to optimize. So optimize if it is readable, it will be ekdamai body easier to optimize it. So next, let's look at this commit strip by commit strip. So so you can read it, right? So there's just one person telling, hey, there variable declare nagar ekdamai slow huncha bhanera, and he's like, are you blaming me for a few bytes while we're using this censored bloated Java framework, right? So this is like a modern context in programming. Now we use a lot of standard libraries, right? So already there's a lot of stuff packed in it. And if you add a little more stuff to your code, it won't matter, right? Because computers nowadays can handle it. So next, let's look at why should my code be readable, right? Because the feature you work on अहिले अरू कसैले फ्युचरमा त्यो फिचरमा काम गर्नुपर्ने हुन सक्छ, राइट? सो हुनुपर्ने सक्छ हैन, डेफिनेटली नै हुन्छ मोस्ट टाइम्समा, राइट? सो यु डोन्ट वान्ट टु एन्ड अप लाइक पाब्लो हियर हैन. सो प्लिज लाइक मेक योर कोड रिडेबल. अनि नेक्स्ट, इफ यु डोन्ट केयर अबाउट एनीवन एल्स, डु इट फर योर ओन सेक, because you might have to come back to it. अघि सुरजले पोइन्ट आउट पनि गरेको थियो. सो यो कतिचोटि भएको छ मलाई. सो कोड लाइक आई कम ब्याक टु अ फिचर, अनि त्यसपछि यसो हेऱ्यो केही बुझ्दैन, यो कसले लेखायो भनेर, अनि त्यसपछि आई बी लाइक ल सोधौँ न त कसले लेखायो, इजियर हुन्छ भनेर. एन्ड देन आई चेक गिट ब्लेम एन्ड इट्स मी. सो प्लिज राइट रिडेबल कोड अगेन. अनि अरू प्लस पोइन्ट्स आर नट इन मीम फर्म, सो लेस रूम टु मेक मिस्टेक्स. सो यु वोन्ट मेक अ लट अफ मिस्टेक्स इफ यु क्यान फलो द लजिक मजाले कोड हेरेर. अनि देयर्स लेस बग्स एज अ रिजल्ट, राइट? So if you can follow the logic, you know what is going into what, so you will avoid a lot of bugs. And again, compilers already perform some basic optimization, so हरेक कुरा optimize गरिराख्नु पर्ने छैन. So यो भनिसकेपछि अब तर optimization is needed पनि भन्यो, is not needed पनि भन्यो हैन. तर what is it, कति बेला चाहिँ evil हो optimization. So when you do not know that some code will be a bottleneck, but you optimize it anyway. So अहिले कोड लेखिरहेछ अनि त्यसपछि यो स्लो हुन्छ होला भनेर आफ्नो गट फिलिङ आयो, and then you optimize it, right? So you go out of your way to optimize it. पुरा सर्च गरेर यो मेथड फास्टर कि त्यो मेथड फास्टर पुरा रिसर्च गर्न थाल्यो भने, now that is evil. So when you try to go beyond the performance expectations of the software you are building, so कुनै software बनाइरहेछ, so let's say it needs to serve only 10 users, and you are wasting time trying to get it to work for 1,000 users. So that is, you're just wasting your time, right? So basically, premature optimization is evil because it wastes your time and effort for nothing, right? So kehi proof ai chaina त्यो slow छ भनेर, and you are wasting your time and effort. So now again, optimization is contextual on the business logic and development platform, as we discussed agi. So एउटा example say typical web service do not need to have a blazing fast response time, right? So because users body when you can always add another machine or vertically scale RAM thapyo, CPU thapyo, and you'll be fine. But look at a game server. So let's say PUBG खेलिरहेछ, so it can't handle 100 users playing at once the server. So vertically scale त गर्ला, so there's a limit, so you can't horizontal scale it because 100 जना एउटै सर्भरमा हुनुपर्छ. So what do you do त्यो केसमा, right? So you need to build it so that it will support 100 users सुरुबाटै, right? So don't overdo it, but look at your requirements अनि त्यो अनुसार optimize it. So there's a question now. So this is a popular quote, right? Premature optimization is the root of all evil, by Donald Knuth. Donald Knuth is known as the father of analysis of algorithms, and he said this, right? So do you guys agree with this? Is my question. So fairy chat ma, yes or no? Okay, so most people said yes, but this is not the full quote. यो कोड चाहिँ इन्टरनेटमा जहाँ पनि छ, राइट? बिकज बट यसको फुल भर्जन चाहिँ एकदमै कम ठाउँमा छ. So this is the full version. We should forget about small efficiencies. Say about 97% of the time, premature optimization is the root of all evil. But wait, it's not over. Azai cha. Yet we should not pass up our opportunities in that critical 3%. So 97% of the time it is evil, but there's that critical 3% we should not leave, right? So that's something to think about. So next, let's look at optimization versus bad coding practices. So this is a fun example, right? So I asked my pal what bad code was and came up with this. So you have to add two numbers, data loop use whether add right? So yeah. So let's look at this, ignore this part. So this is a code. So there's criminal IDs, right? Range 0 to n. So n can be any positive number. And what we do is criminals equals to criminal IDs dot map, fetch criminal from database. So for each criminal ID, we fetch the criminal from the database, right? So this is simple to follow. Who is Robin, you ask? It's this Robin, right? So Batman asks, why did you put a database query inside a loop? And Robin says, I was trying not to optimize prematurely. So this is a bad coding practice. So n could be 3 or 1,000 or a million, right? So million, the million not a query fire on when you could do it with one, right? So this will slow it down a lot. But in an alternate universe, let's say n 2 matra, right? So त्यो केसमा what would Batman say? You are not as fast as you could be, but we can work on your skills later. By the way, I'm Batman. यो चाहिँ अघिको भोइसमा राम्रो सुनिन्थ्यो होला हैन. But okay, so your case चाहिँ why is Batman like positive here? Because you know यसमा जहिले नि 3 वटा क्वेरी हुन्छ भनेर. So it is a performance hit, but त्यस्तो like त्यस्तो ठुलो पनि हैन because it's just 2 extra queries, right? So yeah, so let's look at some more points why optimize. So premature optimization is not an excuse for following bad coding practices, right? So you can't just write bad code and then say, oh, I'm trying not to prematurely optimize. And although premature optimization is evil, the developer should be aware of what they are doing, right? So because we are writing code and we should be aware the code like we should know on a basic level performance impacts and everything related to that, like, right? So basic level you don't need in depth like your method faster, get your method faster, but you need to have an idea. And if it is basic knowledge, then it is not optimization, right? So if something is basic knowledge, then you are not optimizing it, like a join in a database, right? So that is ekdamai basics of database. And if you don't use a join and you say you are not optimizing prematurely, then that isn't valid, right? Unless it's ekdamai complex joins. Now त्यो केसमा चाहिँ apply हुन्छ. If you can do it with 2 or 3 queries instead of writing a very complicated unreadable join, then you do the 2 or 3 queries. Ani, so if your different technique makes the program harder to understand, it's a bad coding practice and might be a premature optimization. So you're like uh, I'm also guilty of this. Paila paila. So code लेख्दाखेरि write it in a different way, पुरै अर्कै गरी, so that you feel like you are doing something different, right? But that is एकदमै bad, especially if you do it in a project जुनमा अरू मान्छेहरूले नि काम गर्छन्, they won't understand it, right? सबैको time waste हुन्छ. So don't do this. Ani, how do you know you are following bad practices? Let other people review your code. Like, this is the most basic way of doing it, right? So अरूले हेरेर if they can understand it राम्ररी, if they can point out any inefficiencies or anything like that, then like you automatically know if you're writing bad code, if you're following bad practices. So so what if this happens, right? So you follow what the person who said write readable code भनिरहेको छ एउटाले, you follow it, अनि त्यो पछि your server cannot scale. What if this happens? So अघि भने जस्तै you need to optimize, but you need to know when to optimize. So when and what to optimize, let's look at this. So in this case, so before development, what should you do? So before working on a feature, have a meeting, right? And set expectations. So each feature or each product को performance expectations हुन्छ, right? We will serve 80 users. This feature एकचोटिमा यतिजना support गर्छ भनेर. So firstमा you should discuss it or think about it. Discussion possible छैन भने सोच्नु पर्यो firstमा. And then you should choose the right data structures, algorithms, code organization before you start coding. Now, a lot of us and me too, we like start coding अनि त्यो पछि सोच्न थाल्छ कुन डेटा स्ट्रक्चर युज गर्ने, कुन एल्गोरिदम युज गर्ने, यो फाइल कसरी अर्गनाइज गर्ने, क्लासेस कसरी डिभाइड गर्ने भनेर. But that should be done before. You should plan before you code. And during development, what do you do? Write code for correctness and then readability. So first, write correctness. So what is correctness? भन्दाखेरि एउटा फिचरको बेसिक रिक्वायरमेन्ट्स हुन्छ. If you meet the requirements, that is called being correct. So right. So your first priority, no matter what, is making sure the feature works, right? And then focus on readability. Like you can make it work and then come back and refactor, right? But make it readable. And you write code that meets the current use case. And do not stress too much about future use cases unless it is confirmed, right? So अघि भने जस्तै फ्युचरमा यो होला, फ्युचरमा युजर्स बढ्ला, फ्युचरमा यो फिचरमा अर्को फिचर एड होला भनेर. Don't think about it, just think about the current requirements. And you write tests so that correctness is not affected in case you decide to refactor. Now this is a tough thing to do, require test लेख्नु, but it is very important if you want to scale properly, if you want your application to scale properly. So write tests and you when you change code for readability or for fixing bugs or for optimization, then it won't be affected. Like, so test run you will immediately know ke wrong cha ke bigrecha bhanera. And if you are worried about something running slow, write performance data to logs. So कुनै part of code slow chalcha भन्ने, if you are worried about it, just write calculate performance data and write it to log. But a lot of libraries do this automatically for you, and especially if you use libraries for web servers or ORMs or query builders, they will automatically do this for you. And you could also write performance tests if you worry about performance. Your last match normal test so performance test start out, but this is good thing to do if you're worried about performance. And code for right now, don't be this guy. So I don't always do agile, but when I do it like waterfall, right? So don't do this code for the current use case, because agile go point you do it for right now. And future when a problem comes, when a new feature needs to be added, you come back and you add to it. So again, so after you develop, so before regression testing. So if you don't know what regression testing is भनेको नयाँ feature बनाइसकेपछि it might affect other features. So you need to test everything as a whole. So that is regression testing. So before you test for regression, you have your peers review your code. So do code reviews. So don't just open pull requests and close them. Do reviews. And that is the ultimate test for readability and finding bad practices, because Oru can point out what the good thing is and what the bad thing is. And yeah, getting your code reviewed is like getting a root canal. It sucks while it's happening, but after taking some time in pain medication, you'll be glad you did it. But मैले चाहिँ root canal गरेको छैन है, I don't know. So in production, so use monitoring and profiling tools and services that measure the time taken for request response, database queries, and whatever else you need to measure. So sabai request responses, database queries, so just measure time using profiling tools. यो चाहिँ most cloud providers provide. I think Google को चाहिँ stack driver भन्ने छ, अनि AWS को there's something मैले नाम बिर्सेँ हैन, but there's a service that just monitor everything, के कुरालाई कति टाइम लागिरहेछ भनेर. अनि you can also set up notifications. So something को requirements यो speedमा चल्नेछ but it's going slower भनेपछि you will be notified and you can investigate, right? So before jumping to a conclusion and trying to look in the code directly, investigate the problem, find the bottleneck. Because जहिले पनि कोडको problem हुँदैन, you because let's say your server was serving 1,000 users at a time, एक्कासी एक दिन चाहिँ 2,000 users भयो रे, अनि so अनि त्यो केसमा चाहिँ you look at the logs and you look at the profiling tools, अनि हरेक कुराको performance drop भएको छ भने you either need to vertically scale or horizontally scale, right? So either add RAM and CPU or add more machines. So you need to like be aware of what you need to scale instead of सिधै कोडमा जानु भन्दा. अनि if this is not the case, एउटा सेक्सनमा मात्र ड्रप भएको छ भने then you look at the code and trying to figure out कसरी optimize गर्ने भनेर, right? So in production, again, let's be real, you won't find the problems until code hits production, right? Because devमा त सब मजाले चल्छ, production गएपछि सक्यो सबै हैन, सबै फेल हुन थाल्छ. So why waste time, right, thinking of future use cases and optimizing? So त्यो भन्दा चाहिँ stress tests are better. So you just perform stress tests on your server and then see how much load it can handle. So refactoring for readability or performance can break your code. So write tests. There's a gentle reminder for you guys, right? Another thing for tests, so testing your own code is like eating healthy. You know you should do it, but it's very easy to keep putting it off until it's painful to start, and you have to get a trainer to help you, right? So you don't get to the point where you need to get a trainer. So how do you make your code readable? So I want to hear from you guys. So would anyone like to share what do you do to make code readable?
Add comments.
एउटा कुरा चाहिँ हामीले त्यो डिभाइड गर्न सक्छौँ कुनै पनि एप्लिकेसन कम्पोनेन्टलाई त्यसको स्मलर पार्ट्समा, त्यसले चाहिँ अलि रिडेबल हुन्छ जस्तो लाग्छ. इफ सबैलाई एउटै ठाउँमा बिग फाइलमा लेख्यो भने मेबी लेस रिडेबल, तर त्यसलाई अलिकति आइसोलेट गरेर ब्रेक गर्यो भने चाहिँ मोर रिडेबल.
फंक्सनको जे नाम छ त्यो मात्रै नाम गर्नुपर्छ फंक्सनले जस्ट.
Okay, nice. And Rosie says functions variables like proper name dine. Yes. Anyone else?
Well-known libraries use गर्यो भने पनि I think it is more readable to a lot of users because they are familiar हैन. Unknown library use गर्यो भने चाहिँ अलि टाइम लाग्ला रिडेबल हुनलाई.
Good point. Okay. Anyone else? Last chance though.
Better naming
conventions. Okay. Okay, so yeah. So अब अरु कोही छ अलि लास्ट चान्स भने, बट अब चाहिँ साच्चै लास्ट चान्स. Okay. All right, so let's move on. त्यसो भए so some tips, right? Don't name your variables how Elon names his children. Use descriptive names. If you don't know about this, Elon named his daughter कसैलाई थाहा छ के थियो नि मैले बिर्सेँ does anyone remember just google it guys so elearn code order ko name google it right don't name your variables how elearn names its children use descriptive names for your identifiers so some tips so use descriptive names right even if they live for only 1 or 2 lines of code don't do this s equals a plus b because s might be anything do sum equals to num1 plus num2 don't do sum num equals to number1 plus number2 if you can and nonetheless if a shortcut is widely accepted in some contexts then you can use those right so I for iterator and counter so I र j and k एकदमै accepted variable name so but if you use I for something else that will cause confusion so best thing is don't use yo pani just name everything so if something counts number of users that just name it user counter or something ij avoid single letter variables and it sets standards for how variables are named throughout the code base right so we will name identifiers camel case ma or snake case ma and class names pascal case ma so some languages they have conventions right so variables snake case ma name गर्ने underscore use गर्ने so camel case use गर्ने pascal case use गर्ने भनेर so follow them or use your own but follow something अनि use a linter to enforce these rules in the code base so linter भनेको चाहिँ it's a tool which will go through your code and you will find problems and it will fix them for you so you can use this especially your arco use भनेको चाहिँ like I said मलाई so I don't use semicolons right javascript गर्दा so you can use a linter जसले चाहिँ I can code without semicolons but push गर्नु भन्दा अगाडि it adds semicolons to everything so that other people are comfortable with it so you can do stuff like that linter use गरेर so that is linters are very good अनि त्योपछि use handy functions which are readable instead of writing traditional loops right so for loops को सट्टा use map filter and reduce and for each so if you don't know what they are map भनेको चाहिँ it goes through all items in an array and then it returns a new array with this with by applying the function to it right so your case it increments everything by 1 and look at the variable names make them understandable incremented by 1 right so अनि त्यसपछि filter भनेको चाहिँ it goes through every item in an array अनि त्यसपछि यो condition match हुनेहरु मात्र लिएर चाहिँ it creates another array so we are filtering out even numbers यसमा right this is way more readable than writing a for loop and then doing if and then pushing it to अर्को array and use reduce ले चाहिँ it takes a set of it takes an array and it reduces it to a single value so your case we are summing all the numbers right so we are adding everything to itself and we are returning the final sum right so these methods are available in most of the languages so use them they make it very readable because most of the times loops and conditionals ले हो complicate गर्ने readability like so just use these kind of methods which are more readable and make conditions easier to read so use guard clauses so if you don't know guard clauses भनेको के हो guard clauses भने चाहिँ you use if statements to return as early as possible so you look at this code right so यसले के गर्दा छ मलाई त यो कोड देखेर लाइक पढ्न पनि मन लाग्दैन बिकज यो if को ब्रान्च फलो गर्नुपर्छ राइट सो यो सेकेन्ड इफमा पुग्दाखेरि फर्स्ट इफको कन्डिसन के थियो भनेर दिमागमा राखिराख्नुपर्छ यो पढ्दाखेरि राइट सो दिस इज एकदमै गाह्रो टु रिड बट if you just use a function and you just if a is not return b if b is not return a return e plus b this is very easy to read this does the same thing but this is easy so use guard clauses and avoid reassigning variables so let's say we have a function right which receives a map so यसले चाहिँ query string बनाउँछ so url मा so last part मा question mark अनि something equals to something हुन्छ so त्यो कन्स्ट्रक्ट गर्छ म्यापबाट सो वान वे टु डु इट एउटा स्ट्रिङ डिक्लेयर गर्यो अनि किज निकाल्यो लुप थ्रु अल द किज अनि कीको भ्याल्यु नल छ भने स्किप इट नत्र चाहिँ एड इट अनि अलरेडी केही छ भने एम्परस्यान्ड एड गर राइट दिस इज कम्प्लिकेटेड टु फलो बट इफ यु राइट इट लाइक दिस सो किज विथ भ्याल्यु भनेको गेट अल द किज filter out all the keys whose value is null So you get keys with value and you construct each part त्यसपछि so each key लाई map गरेर key equals to value गर्ने अनि लास्टमा join it with an ampersand सक्यो right you do it's not complicated plus यसमा हामीले we are not saving memory so we are declaring as many variables as possible किनभने यो त चेन गर्न मिल्छ नि त फिल्टर पछि म्याप सँगै but we are declaring other variables so पढ्न सजिलो होस् भनेर you know what everything represents अनि अर्को चाहिँ functions do whatever their name implies nothing more nothing less so यसमा चाहिँ let's say we have a method that handles logins so get user from credentials username र password so one way to do it is so get users so it will check the username check the password अनि यो फंक्सनले अर्को के गर्छ भन्दाखेरि युजरको लगिन काउन्ट स्टोर गरेर सो यतिचोटी लगिन गर्यो भनेर so you could do this or you could do this get user from credentials and it just do what it says it gets the user from credentials nothing more nothing less and increment चाहिँ अर्को स्टेटमेन्टमा गर्यो so कसैले लाइक यो कोड मात्र हेरिरहेछ भने दे नो यसले के गर्दैछ अनि यो सेकेन्डले इन्क्रिमेन्ट मात्र गर्दैछ अरु केही गर्दै छैन बट कसैले यो कोड हेर्यो भने यसमा हिडन डिटेल छ यो लगिन काउन्ट इन्क्रिमेन्ट गर्ने बट यो मात्र हेरेर त कसैले पनि थाहा हुँदैन यसले इन्क्रिमेन्ट गर्छ भनेर सो यु शुड either rename this right get user and then increment or do this so another tip do code reviews right so your peers can look at your code and you can look at your peers code and improve and so now we have some tools to find bottlenecks so these are very common tools so if you work with queries there's the explain statement right so suppose you need to optimize so you figured out that code slow chalyo I need to optimize it bhanera so you can use the explain statement so I'll show you quickly ke garcha bhanera so don't mind this stuff so don't mind the query pani just note that first my explain lecha right यो query ma so if I run this then this will show me यसको cost कति लाग्छ भनेर अनि index scan so it is using an index यो scan गर्दाखेरि अनि sequential scan so यो भन्ने चाहिँ यसमा index छैन so I'm just going through all the rows भनेर like this is telling you अनि यहाँ लास्टमा चाहिँ you will see the total cost right so 59.85 to 60 lakhs so if you have two queries that do the same thing you can compare them by using explain right so this is a tip for databases for everything else you can use profiling tools so I have an example for this so यहाँ चाहिँ एउटा code छ what it does is when you click that button it performs some magic भने चाहिँ it loops 0 देखि 100,000 सम्म and prints it all right so let's see यो magic गर्दा के हुन्छ so do the magic it takes time right because 100,000 एउटा loop write गर्दा छ but अब यो किन slow भइरा भने suppose I don't know so your Chrome मा चाहिँ there's the performance tab if you have not used this you can use this for optimizations right so यस्तै गरी अरु languages मा you can use other profilers यो performance tab also works with Node.js apps so connect गर्नु मिल्छ यसमा so let's record and then click do the magic अब एकछिन time लाग्छ so give it some time because profiling गर्दा चाहिँ it will take more time than normal okay Okay, 27 seconds ma bhayo. Okay, print bhayo. Now let's wait for this to finish. Okay, let's stop. Okay, अब यसले चाहिँ it's generating a report अनि यहाँ चाहिँ सबै print भइसक्यो हैन so let's wait okay यत्रो टाइम त नलाग्नु पर्ने okay I'll just show you यसमा त्यसो भए okay so let's do this यसमा so let's test performance of Google Slides so let's record so let's press some buttons and let's stop. Recording bonus. Recording bonus. Okay, I'll close this. So I'll record. Let's stop. So this will generate kind of like a heat map, and yeah, you can see के कुराले कति time लागिरहेछ. So JavaScript run हुन 717 milliseconds, actually render गर्न 233 milliseconds, अनि paint गर्न 107, अनि system calls 215, right? अनि idle यत्रो बेरले. So you can see everything. अनि let's say you know अब so you can look at these कति time लाग्यो भनेर, and then you can just dig down. So mouse down, so mouse click my KK call go, right? You can look at everything, you can follow the functions, kunma kati time lagiरहेछ भनेर, and you can identify कुन कुराले चाहिँ time लागिरहेको भनेर. Now you can do this in most all programming languages. So use profilers. Okay. अनि त्यसपछि locks are your friends, right? So केही कुरा wrong गयो or something is not working as expected, look at your logs and find out the problems. And error reporting tools are very useful. So one example is Sentry. So you connect it to your app and it reports all errors, and you can even set up stuff to measure performance, and you can be notified and everything. So this will help you. And in the conclusion, I would say, so the acceptable level of readability and performance depends on the application that you're building, right? So आफ्नो requirements, आफ्नो features सबैमा भर पर्छ. अनि writing readable code makes everyone's life easier, including yourself. And be aware of who will read your code, right? So if you are working with a set of computer scientists who work with algorithms and data structures every day, right? So write code in that way. If your team consists of people who don't work with algorithms every day, then make it a little more readable. And because if you're writing performant code, if you're writing an operating system, of course you have to prefer optimization over, not, let's not say over readability, but most of the times you have to think about optimization. And the more you share your code and read others' code, the more readable code you can write. So do code reviews, right? अर्को कोड हेरेर अनि त्यसपछि आफ्नो कोडहरूलाई देखाएर you learn a lot. अनि again, Ronald Knuth, we should forget about small efficiencies. 97% of the time it is evil, but we should not pass up our opportunities in that critical 3%. And optimization is premature unless you have proof that optimization will help, or otherwise you are solving a problem that does not exist. So if you have proof that something is a bottleneck, त्यो केसमा say you can optimize, नत्र you don't have proof, you are solving a problem that does not exist. And set performance expectations before coding and code for correctness, right? So plan out suruma ani balla code, and also write tests if possible, because that's not always possible. And you don't be waterfall agile, be agile pani. So yeah, so that was the session. And now I would like to hear from you guys, what you guys thought, what you guys could take away from the session. Yeah, so you can use the chat or you can speak out.
एउटा कुरा चाहिँ त्यो कमेन्ट्सहरु नि एड गर्न मिल्छ जस्तो लाग्छ टु मेक कोड रिडेबल.
त्यो मैले बिर्से, सरी.
त्यो कोडै त हैन, बट इफ कोड इज अनरिडेबल कमेन्ट्स एड गर्दिने.
Yes. So anyone else, you can even add, you can add or give feedback or tell us what you have learned. You can use the chat. So Rosie says, beware of premature optimization. Yes. Yes, we should beware. All right, guys, it's so indentation. Yes, indentation. मैले छुटा. Yes, indentation is important. And I didn't know about the browser profiler. Yes, you're welcome. Cow programming language is a thing. Yes, you should check out Brain Beep. Fill in the beep. Uses of load-dash, etc. might be helpful for readable code. Yes, external libraries अघि पनि सुरजले भनेको थियो. So external libraries will make it easy. Yes. So instead of git bloom, you can use git lens extension. Yes. Okay, guys. So thank you for all for sharing. And yeah, thank you for your valuable time. Any last thing, chai, like we'll send you a feedback form. Any please fill it out and let us know kasto bhayo bhanera, because this only happens in the session, not in a form. So guys, fill it out and thank you for your time. And yeah, have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Vikas.
Welcome.
Thank you, Bikash.
You're welcome, guys.
Thank you, Bikash, for the session.